Hi, my name is Estefania Agreda, and I'm going to be talking about how chemical castration should be a term of release for sex offenders. Now, it's common knowledge that within the criminal justice system, the punishment should equal the crime. Thieves get a set amount of jail time, and then they get released depending on the severity of the theft. Murderers get a life sentence, or they get the death penalty. But sex offenders get a set amount of years in jail, and then they're released again. But they're different from the thieves that get released again because, to me at least, sex crimes are much more detrimental than property crimes. So what can we do to sort of fix this disparity? Well, for hundreds of years, castration has been used as a form of punishment for those who commit sex crimes. It's been around since forever, and we know it, but in modern days, not only do we have forms of surgical castration, but for the past 40 years or so, there has been a development of chemical castration, which is much safer, obviously. Now, the use of chemical castration is a justifiable form of punishment for sex offenders, as it is intended to biologically remove the urge to commit sexual offenses and is a way of ensuring that these criminals are released, that when these criminals are released, that they are theoretically no longer a threat to society. Now, what exactly is castration? Let's go into that a little bit. Now, we can all assume what surgical castration entails. That's not the important part here. What's important is what exactly is chemical castration. Well, in a nutshell, it's the use of medical treatment to reduce or remove sex drive. One treatment is the use of birth control to reduce male libido, and yes, I mean female birth control. Another form of treatment is the use of anti-androgen drugs, often paired with antidepressant drugs. All of this, basically, it's all meant to reduce and eventually eliminate sex drive in males. Now, this is a form of treatment, and it's administered over a course of time, over several months. It's not just an instantaneous thing. It is a treatment plan. Now, before, years ago, chemical castration was purely an experimental thing, and it was done mostly for research purposes on sex offenders, and it was involuntary most of the times. But now, at least 9 states in the United States have a form or some kind of chemical castration law. The very first state in the U.S. to pass this law, a policy, which actually gave guidelines to what is chemical castration, what kinds of chemical castration to use, and what kinds of sex offenders are eligible for treatment. The very first state to do that was California in 1996. Now, the second state was Florida the year after. And basically, these laws were made for second-time sex offenders, and they were specifically for those who were convicted of child molestation of kids under the age of 13. Now, of course, like with anything else, there's always going to be people for it and people against it, and there's always ethical issues that we need to discuss. Now, those that are opposed to chemical castration, their argument is basically that it goes against our 14th Amendment right, which, because it fails to guarantee equal protection. They also argue that it goes against our 5th Amendment right, against cruel and unusual punishment. And pretty much they say that it should just be deemed illegal completely under the 8th Amendment. But I personally don't agree with this, because sex offenders, in my eyes, are not punished enough. And a lot of people argue that the death penalty in and of itself is cruel and unusual, but it's really not. If you kill somebody, you deserve equal punishment. Now, if you commit a sex crime against somebody, again, you deserve equal punishment. Now, to me, sex crimes are just as heinous as murders. Though they may not kill the victims, they are potentially scarring them for life. They do their jail time, but then they're free to eventually commit these crimes again. And a lot of times, these perverse sexual urges are due to mental illness, so more action needs to be taken to eliminate this issue. It's which is why I'm for chemical castration, because it's not just a punishment, it's also a treatment for these individuals, for these criminals. Currently, chemical castration is purely voluntary, and in some places it's a condition of release for second-time offenders. And personally, I've always been a huge advocate for chemical castration of sex offenders. And although many people argue that chemical castration, again, goes against some of our rights, I don't think it's neither cruel or unusual, because, again, it's on a voluntary basis, and it's a treatment working towards rehabilitation of these criminals. Now, it's a certified medical procedure, and it's performed only by licensed doctors, and there's an entire series of treatments that go along with it. Again, some drugs are administered, and a lot of times they have antidepressant drugs to go with it. It's a whole psychological process, pretty much, not just a chemical process. I also feel that chemical castration is most certainly a viable term for sex offenders of all kinds, not just child molesters. And it is basically, it's just my belief that if murderers are given the death penalty, then sex offenders should definitely be given chemical castration.